podcast community of podcasters gathered to discuss our theological differences with love and charity. This is a ministry of striving for eternity.
All right. Well, welcome to another Theology Throw Down. This is put on by the Christian podcast community, where we gather together, discuss different topics in a theological nature. Tonight's topic is going to be celebrity preachers. Now, I am making a distinction between celebrity pastors and celebrity preachers, because there is a difference between the two. We're including people that would not necessarily only be pastors. You think of many apologists out there that are not pastors that would also be included in this. Many people that travel and are speakers. I could think of Justin Peters as one who is more of an evangelist, or Ray Comfort. I would think of apologists in the realm of, William Lane Craig, Jim Wallace. These are all men who are in the speaking circuit. They preach, but they're not necessarily pastors. And so we're kind of expanding that. And so what we want to do is cover some different topics about this. This is something we see in the church. A lot of people who follow their different favorite pastor, preacher. And is it helpful? Is it harmful? Those are some of the topics we're going to discuss. We have a smaller group of podcasters that are here today, but we're going to go through and let everyone introduce themselves, their podcast, and anything they have going on with their podcast. So Drew, I'll start with you. You were the first one in. So why don't you introduce yourself, your podcast, and anything else?
Yeah, my name is Drew Vonita. I am one of the hosts of the Matter of Theology podcast. We seek to address church and cultural issues from a biblical standpoint. So we are on the Christian podcast community. We've been there for about a year and we love it. Andrew Rappaport is great. Despite the rumors that go around about him, we tolerate him. He's funny sometimes, but it has been a blessing to be a part of the Christian podcast community and a lot of the things that go on. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this topic.
When you say funny, I do appreciate that. Looks are not everything. So thank you. Colleen, you were in here next. How about you introduce yourself and your podcast?
I'm Colleen Sharp, and I host Theology Gals, and we talk all things Reformed theology and the Christian life.
Okay, and then Eve, you are next.
Okay, well, I'm Eve Franklin, and I co-host the podcast Are You Just Watching, in which we discuss secular entertainment from a Christian worldview. And I also have a handbook called Are You Just Watching as well that you can buy from Amazon that basically teaches you how to do the same thing. So,
yes, and I've been trying to watch. Listening to your podcast, I've been trying. I did set that this year I was going to try to watch all the Marvel movies. For folks who are watched Marvel movies, Eve makes fun of me because I started with the one called Endgame, which is, I guess, at the end of 20 some movies.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't get the point. But I'm Andrew Rappaport, the host of several podcasts, The Rapp Report. That's my weekly podcast that we have. Deals with primarily what we try to focus in on is interpretation of Scripture and also application, whether it be to culture, whether it be to church. We also have Apologetics Live, which is a live show on Thursday nights. You go to apologeticslive.com. You can join, ask any question about God in the Bible, because I can answer any question that you have about God in the Bible. You doubt that? Well, join us on Thursday night and test that. Be happy to prove it. So we're going to start tonight with the idea of celebrity preachers. And I mean, the first thing I think is to ask the question, are they helpful to the body of Christ? So again, we're thinking of, when you think of pastors, I think of men like John MacArthur, R.C. Sproul, though he's now with the Lord, Vodi Bakum, Just think of the different names that people have. I mean, basically just think of the lineup at G3 conference.
Yeah.
And they're all like the celebrity pastors. By the way, I should give a shout out to Drew, to our friend Brandon Skyfe, who runs Cruciform Ministries. I'm wearing his T-shirt finally.
Yeah.
Obey God.
Obey God, defy tyrants. Yep.
I've worn it before. He just gets upset because he's like, "You never wear it when you're on your show." I don't wear T-shirts typically on my show.
I'll tell him tonight. I will tell him that you wore it. So.
Yeah. So I did it just for him. So, but so do you guys, I mean, let me just open it up. Drew, I'll start with you. Do you think that celebrity preachers have a value to the body of Christ?
I think they do, depending on their motive, right? So you mentioned John MacArthur. John MacArthur, if you've gone through seminary and you've had to write papers, John MacArthur is not counted as a scholarly source. He's counted as a popular source because he is a little more celebrity status rather than scholarly status. But John MacArthur's whole focus and motive and goal is to magnify Christ. So through John MacArthur's, we'll say celebrity status, his whole goal is to make Christ known. He's just the tool that God's using to make Christ known. Now, you also have on the other side, you've got people who want the fame and want the status of celebrity. And these are guys, the first one that pops into my mind would be like a Stephen Furtick. They're not theologically sound. They know how to hype up the crowd. They know how to get people in a frenzy, but they leave people void of the gospel and actually void of any biblical instruction and teaching. So I think there is a value to a celebrity status depending on the motive. Now, the problem is when I look at, we'll say in reform circles, who the people we would count as celebrities within those circles, they're also men that don't desire to be celebrities in the first place. They just want to preach the gospel, teach others to live out the gospel, and that's it.
Colleen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm probably going to have a little bit different perspective, maybe. So I'm going to say celebrity Christians, because I think that encompasses a lot. You even have like someone like Al Mohler, and he's popular because of his podcast and speaking engagements. And you even have somebody like Sinclair Ferguson, which probably isn't celebrity as much, but has written books and does some speaking engagements and whatnot. Sorry, I just dropped something. Sorry to our audience. I have more and more concerns with celebrity Christians recently for a couple different reasons. And like Drew said, you definitely have like some that are not very sound theological, although I may push back on what he said about motive, because while he was saying that, I thought of somebody who I think really does have a heart to help people, but is just ignorant and says some stupid things sometimes. I just heard an interview with somebody, not even going to say who it is. He's not actually, his church is well known. Probably not as well known as some that we're talking about. And I think this guy really does want to do something for the Lord, but he's just ignorant. So his motives may be okay, but he just hasn't been discipled well and been given a high position without the discipleship and teaching. But so one of my concerns, first of all, if we say celebrity pastor, it's very difficult for me to understand somebody with I very opposed to large churches. I don't know how a pastor shepherds his flock in a church with thousands. Now I go to Reformed church, so we have small churches, and I understand that's not always practical, but I've always been that annoying congregant. If I have a problem, I'm calling my pastor at 2 p.m. When I ended up at the hospital in the middle of the night and was having emergency surgery, and we called my pastor, and he at 6 a.m. woke him up and he was there before I got out of surgery praying with my husband.
Mm.
And so when I think of pastor, that's what I think of. So I would oppose it on that level. I think that there's benefits with the resources, but it concerns me a couple besides that. The other thing that concerns me is the amount of people that are listening far more to other pastors than they are their own. That concerns me a lot. That other pastor has no authority over you.
Amen.
To the point that they're going to be like, well, my pastor says such and such, but so-and-so, my favorite celebrity pastor, says something different. Even with COVID, there were celebrity pastors saying, if your church is doing A, B, and C, you need to leave that church. Okay, no, I don't like that sort of thing. And then lastly, and I hadn't thought about this a lot, but I think it's just so important for us to put our greatest emphasis on our local church. Okay, then to my lastly is I also see a problem with some of these pastors. This is not their fault. This is maybe the people's fault more, being elevated to an amount that makes me very uncomfortable. So certain pastors in our circles, certain pastors seem to be fair game to criticize. So you can criticize Stephen Furtick and Joel Osteen, Beth Moore, and blah, 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 all day long. You'll even go on Twitter, you can get a lot of likes if you criticize any of them. But because of how much some of these celebrity pastors, preachers, teachers, Christians are elevated, there is a how dare you criticize them, and that makes me very, very uncomfortable too. And some people, let me say about that, since I've been attacked very greatly for calling out the false theology of a certain popular celebrity pastor, that I do think that we need to be very mindful in how we do it. We don't want to act like Christians, like we're Jesus every day turning over the tables, which I think some do. I think we are still called to have love and grace and wisdom in the way that we do that. So I know I said a lot there. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, well, you got into all the whole outline for tonight. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot we're going to end up digging into with that. But Eve, what are your thoughts when we talk of celebrity preachers? And it's, I'm saying preachers because I do think that it's not just pastors. I think that, it's interesting when Drew, you were talking, it would have been Colleen, but Kanye West came into mind, right? He's this celebrity, and he had this celebrity status beforehand, but it's like everyone just looked to him like he's doing these, Sunday services things, and he's not a pastor. He's not even really a preacher. He's a musician, but he had this celebrity status, and he's not even, so he could throw in there just, I guess it was Colleen, it's just celebrity Christians, because he's not really a preacher.
Right.
So Eve, what are your thoughts? What do you find value in having men like this, men or women that have that celebrity status?
I don't know. I guess I'm a little thrown by how you're defining a celebrity Christian, because I think that there are some good and there's a lot of bad. And I think our only ruler by which we can measure the good from the bad is how they handle the word of God. And if they're promoting the gospel and they're promoting the authority of scripture and they're putting forward Christ, then they have an actual reason for, I guess, being in the front of people, in front of people, and having, and they've been made popular because they have a message that people needed to hear, and they I don't know, I don't have a problem with that, because I think that the celebrity is driven by the necessity of their message to be heard. But there might be that might actually be a very small minority of the celebrity Christians that are out there the way you're defining it. There are probably a lot more of the ones that are celebrities simply because they crave the fame, and they've allowed it to go to their heads. and they're not promoting the gospel, and their ministry is not led by Christ, and they don't have godly men over them, that are directing them in the steps they take in their celebrity. And I think that any ministry, I mean, even the four of us here can become celebrity, because we're all generating a following. When we do a podcast, that's what we do, is we generate a following. And the people who listen to us, however few that is, or however many that is, could consider us to be celebrities because of that we have a message that we're putting out publicly. And so I think that it just engenders any necessity of us, whatever we do, whatever as Christians, to always be putting the gospel and the authority of Scripture first. Because if we let any of this stuff go to our heads, any of us could take a wrong step, because we're all human, and we all fall victim to pride and arrogance and the other sins that beset people who are celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I didn't think about that as much, but we are putting ourselves out there as podcasters, and people do follow. And so how do you define a celebrity? I was just this past weekend up in Boston, and we went to this Museum of Science, and, all of a sudden I'm hearing someone saying, Andrew Rappaport? Now granted, if you're not wearing a face mask, it's easier to recognize a person, but yeah, I mean, it's like, my bride and we've gone places where, I was on a cruise and someone had, spotted me, and, I just went up to go get a soda, and, they had read my book and knew who I was and ended up talking for a while. So, you have that happen often, but at what level does you suddenly become a celebrity, right? But so I'm thinking, when I think of it, I'm thinking of the people that have the much larger platforms.
But how did they get those platforms?
They started off small. Yeah. I mean, I remember a guy in New York City who he had, and I don't know if this is an actual thing. He had like this, you're an A, B, C, D level celebrity. And I forget how he worded, like, how he figured out which level you were. I forget now. It was like, if people recognize you when you go out places, you were like a D level. And then I forget, he had all these different things for it, but there's people that try to, I guess, figure that out. But I'm thinking of the people, when I think of celebrity preachers, I'm thinking of, we already mentioned like a MacArthur. And I think the thing with MacArthur, Drew, you said he's not seen as being scholarly. Well, it's because he really is preaching, his platform is for his people.
Right. That's right.
He's writing the commentaries, he's preaching, it's for his people. The fact that others use it, fine, that's great, but that's not his goal.
Right.
That's the thing. And so what I end up looking at is I look at, the case where I think there is benefit. And how did we get these people? I think that this is something people don't really think about. I think a lot of it came about with the invention of radio. When radio first started, you had a lot of local pastors that were on the local radio stations. And then certain people just started being listened to more and more, and they started being syndicated. Other radio stations that were nearby wanted to carry the same person. So they ended up becoming syndicated. And really those are where you started having the celebrities, where those people that were syndicated across different radio stations, and then they end up having a ministry that's a radio ministry and speaking ministry, things like that. And so I think that you end up seeing a lot more of people who are, have Eve, kind of like you said, they start off small, building up a platform, and people are just like them and follow them. Now what you see on the Christian radio is it's all like the celebrities. Mm-hmm. You don't have as much of the local guys anymore, which I think is sad. And we'll get to that when we talk about the importance of local church versus celebrities.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad, Colleen, I'm really glad that you brought that up. You touched that up, because I think that's super important to discuss.
Well, I wanted to say real quick, just on Eve's point, I think what she said about some of them letting it get to their head reminded me. My husband, as a new Christian, went to a church called Willow Creek before it was as big. I mean, it was pretty big when he started going, but not what it became. I think most people in the US, at least my age, have heard of Willow Creek. They really, I mean, my husband has been in Bill Hybels' home and had great respect for Bill Hybels. And a lot of things that my husband really saw as ways to protect himself from being foolish, I guess, from letting it get to his head and things like that. Even the amount of money, at least in the beginning, he lived in a modest home. And when that got really big, he went to a church called Harvest that was a church plant meeting in a high school by James MacDonald. And both of these pastors have, and he's been in James MacDonald's home too. Both of these pastors have had pretty public fallings of sort. But my husband said something very interesting. He said, it didn't surprise me about James MacDonald, but it did about Bill Hybels. And I think one of the things I think of, even for myself, if I started acting, my podcast has gotten pretty big. If I started acting arrogant, I have accountability partners that would knock me down and say, you better stop right now, Colleen. I think, and Andrew probably can speak a lot to that I know that he has so many people that surround him with Striving for Eternity that keep him accountable. But continuing that, because when you get popular, you also get a certain amount of power, and maybe it's easy I'm not going to be accountable anymore to those people or something.
Well, yeah, I think you get people that are just enamored with the platform, and because of that, they don't want to say anything bad. But, you know, I think, oh, go ahead, Colleen.
Well, I was going to say that some of that might be where we look into the ministries and see if these, like the face of the ministry has somebody that he's accountable to behind him. So like a ministry that actually has a board of directors of godly men who govern him or control how big he gets, kind of thing. And I think that's especially valuable for any ministry, especially a ministry of any size, to make sure that they have that accountability within, especially if it's surrounded around a particular person. Because even if that person is humble and is doing it for the Lord, he's human, and whether he falls from grace or he dies, God calls him home, the ministry will suffer either way. And so you need to have have something set up to take his place and not pretend like he's I've seen so many ministries that happened to, where they were centered around an individual, and the individual dies, and the whole ministry just.
Yeah. Well, that's why at Striving for Eternity, we've for years, and Colleen knows this because she's been around for a lot of it, but we've been shifting so that it wasn't just about me. That's why we brought in, Dr. Silvestro, we brought in Frank Malls for a while, but we're trying to build up that it's a speaking ministry and discipling ministry more than just Andrew Rappaport.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask the question. Chris Huff, who is one of the other podcasters over at Matter of Theology, has joined us. Chris, we're talking about celebrity preachers, not just pastors, but guys that are out there who are on the circuit, shall we say. Do you find them to be helpful for the body of Christ? We end up talking already about like some of the dangers. We're going to dig in more to that, but do you find them helpful for the body of Christ?
I mean, it just depends, right? It just depends on who it is. And Colleen was mentioning some two names who have unfortunately brought reproach on especially James MacDonald on the name of Christ, and of course have painted the church in a light that she shouldn't be painted in. I mean, I would say I think of guys like R.C. Sproul, to the point you guys are just making. You look at Dr. Sproul, who passed away in December of 2017, and Ligonier is still doing great, still going strong, still having, they just had their national conference and had a very, very good turnout there. They're still producing content, solid content through the teaching fellows there. I think Dr. Sproul would probably not want to have himself referred to as a celebrity preacher, but he's known, right? His name is known. I think guys like Dr. MacArthur, 82 years old this June. And when the Lord does call him home, I do know that Grace to You and Grace Community Church has a solid team of elders and pastors and leaders there, and those ministries will continue. And I'll say, because of the humility of those men, of Dr. MacArthur and Dr. Sproul. To answer your question directly, Andrew, yes, I think they're helpful if they are, number one, regulated completely by the scriptures, and if they have a team, to Eve's point or Colleen's point, I can't remember who just said that, who's willing to keep them accountable, and not just a team of yes men, but they have a team that's willing to say, hey, you're a sinner just like I am, and whatever the case may be, or would be willing to kind of pull them back down to earth when they start thinking that they've levitated above everybody else. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, so much of this that we've been, like, every one of us are kind of focused in on, yes, they're helpful, but.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, we've already mentioned some of the buts. So why don't we start with you, Chris? I mean, what do you see as some of the dangers then of having celebrity preachers?
Ooh, some of the danger. I mean, so what you can end up having is you can have people that will, the celebrity status. I think of, I'm going to use the example just because he's been a huge influence in my life, of Dr. John MacArthur. And you've got people that will watch the live stream of Grace Community Church, and they will substitute that in their lives instead of attending and plugging into and serving and being served by a biblical church locally where they are. That would be one of the dangers. Now, again, I mean, Grace does a great job of saying this is not a replacement. This is not in lieu of your local church, but it's a way to for the truths of God's word, to use the multimedia and the technology that's available to us for, I think specifically about Grace to You. I just had this conversation with a brother today. The whole mission statement of Grace to You is to use the multimedia technology that's available to expose as many people to the teachings of Dr. John MacArthur as possible. Again, the danger of that, though, is you don't want that to supplement the physical gathering that we're all commanded to do week in and week out, Lord's Day, and to be involved in an Acts 2 type of way in a church. So that there's a danger. It can, some people can elevate that and try to supplement that for church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's that. We've all kind of said this. Each one of us have kind of focused on that. Is that there does seem to be this danger when, and I think, Drew, you started with this, is saying it depends on their motivation, right? Are they helpful or are they dangerous? If they're just trying to build a platform, and I've seen this. I've seen guys that are just trying to build a platform. They'll do things just to get numbers, clickbait, and things like that. I've seen people that are willing to be dishonest in social media just to get a bunch of people talking about them. And, so we see that there are those types that end up focusing more on the platform. And I think that becomes a danger that we've all kind of mentioned, that they need to be, focused on what God called them to. I'll tell you a guy who I think could be in the celebrity pastor category and never will be. And that's Jim Osmond, who has, he's got his Kootenai Community Church worship service is one of the podcasts on the Christian podcast community. Jim is a guy that you're never going to see on the circuit. Why? Because he's serving his church.
Yeah.
And if you listen to his sermons, he's probably one of the best preachers out there. He is one of my favorite preachers. Mm-hmm. But he's never gonna go traveling to go speak at these conferences. I mean, he does once in a blue moon, but he doesn't do that regularly because his focus is his church. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so he doesn't lose sight of that. And he doesn't want to have anything that gets in the way of that. Sure. Those are the kind of men that I really, uphold and look to.
Yeah, and I think you can do both to a degree. You know,
Yeah.
I think of somebody like Dr. Josh Weiss, and I think of what he does with G3, and but his whole, one of the whole reasons that Virgil Walker is now the executive director of operations for G3 Ministries is number one, the organization of G3 is just too much for one person to handle. But then number two, one of Josh's top priorities is Praise Mill Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking some of the operational side, the operational piece of the monstrosity just in size that is G3, and handing that off to Virgil. And so Virgil can do his thing, frees Josh up to be able to do what he knows to be of first importance behind his family, and that is shepherding the flock that God has given him there at Praise Mill.
Yeah, and
So,
even to speak into Josh, because Chris, you and I both know Josh,
yeah.
and he's a guy that even after services, he makes it a point to, if you're visiting, he wants to meet you personally, who are just visiting, and personally welcome you to Praise Mill, and that's also how all of the elders there are. So it's not just him, it's all the elders that he has raised up. They also have that mentality as well.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that we end up seeing with it is, and I think Colleen, you were the one that might have said this, is kind of when it goes to someone's head that they're big, they start acting different. They feel like, oh, I got to behave a certain way. You get that. That's when I think it can become a danger.
Absolutely.
And as Chris, you mentioned, and some others, when you surround yourself with yes men, people that, look, let's look at two individuals who passed away. We could look at Ravi Zacharias and R.C. Sproul and just look at the difference. When R.C. Sproul passed away, the ministry continued without a hitch and is still growing and doing fine. And no one's questioning, what's going to be the future of the ministry.
Right.
Ravi Zacharias Ministries is in great jeopardy because the people that surrounded him were not really keeping him accountable. And now that's exposed. They tried to do some cover up and things, but the reality is it's now exposed for everyone to see. No, they dropped the ball. Yeah. And I'm sure that their donations have taken a huge hit because of it. There's talk of renaming it. But you look at what ends up happening. How does that happen? I think it happens because when you start to have people that gain a platform, those that are around them, some of them, there is a pride. We all struggle with pride.
Yeah.
And there's a pride of being like, well, I know so-and-so, there's a pride of being in the in crowd. I remember, and this is sort of to my shame, but there was a guy who was a very well-known evangelist, and we were at a conference, Deeper conference. He was one of the speakers, and I knew him personally. He asked me to bring some stuff up. He wanted some DVDs that I had, and I said, I'll bring them up, give them to you at the Deeper conference. This guy had a line down the hall, around the corner. Hundreds of people wanting to talk to him. I'm not going to wait in line to give him DVDs. I just tapped him on the shoulder, and he did the quick look, and then the recognition, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Andrew." I obviously waited in between people, and I just said, gave him the DVDs. He ends up. He's like, "Oh, no, wait, don't go off. How'd that conference you went to? He wanted to know about." I'm like, Mark, just call me next week when we get back. Call me and we'll talk. You know my number. Call me next week. I'm like thinking of all the people in line. It was amazing because this is the first time this happened. As soon as I walked away from him, I had 3 people that suddenly surrounded me, acting like they wanted to get to know me. And they really didn't. They wanted to get to know the person I knew. And to my shame, I didn't know how to handle it. And so I felt that pride of like, yeah, I know him, we're friends, and then the very next moment I'm like, well, how wicked is that? And so to my shame, I lied and told this guy I had a meeting and I had to be somewhere, and I really didn't, which was wrong. And so what did I do? I walked out the doors pretending like I had somewhere to be, and I walked around the building and came back in and hoped he was gone. But it showed me how prideful we could be, and I've learned
Absolutely.
to kind of deal with that, to realize, okay, let's, because I am at conferences, I do speak with people, I do get to know some people, and it's a thing where I got to be careful. Like, I don't want to be, hey, like I know so-and-so, but what ends up happening with a lot of these guys that are close to them, that are supposed to keep them accountable, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The yes men thing you were saying, I did want to say, shameless plug on an episode of Theology Gals. Somebody who has very, very good things to say on this topic is Darby Stouffer, who is R.C. Sproul's granddaughter. And she's a dear friend, and actually is on the Theology Gals team, and she said one day, let's do an episode together on celebrity pastors, because she saw it from a very different perspective. She grew up in it. And not a huge celebrity pastor, but does have some celebrity, is my brother-in-law's dad, Rod Rosenblatt. And that he doesn't even like it at all when people are like, get excited about meeting him. But there was a conference a few years ago, and I see Rod off talking to somebody, and he's crying with them, because that's how he is. For him, it's all about the gospel and loving people and being Christ to people. That's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to be the celebrity. He wants to be the one-on-one with people. If you don't know who he was on the White Horse Inn radio program, when it used to be a radio program, for 25 years. And yeah, people will do that to me. They'll be like, "Oh, Rod," like Andrew was saying. And yeah, I think sorry, I muted myself. I think the big thing that's so important for all of us to remember is it can happen to anybody, because we're sinners. And I think even in a ministry that maybe becomes popular, even if you try not to, you can still end up with yes men, because you're the popular person there. And I think one of my concerns I mentioned in the beginning is our tendency to elevate some of these teachers almost like they're next to God. And so then somebody says, well, I disagree with Pastor so-and-so on such and such, and everyone, you can see it on Twitter. Okay. Someone can with grace and kindness say, I disagree with John MacArthur, or I disagree with R.C. Sproul on such and such.
Sure.
And the fanboys come out and attack, like, how dare you disagree with them?
Well, I had that in church I was in. I don't agree with John MacArthur on everything, but it was almost as if John MacArthur was used as, once he said it, it's almost like God has spoken. And it's like, I'm sorry, like John MacArthur, I think he's probably influenced me more than any other preacher, but he's a man. There's areas that disagree with him. He's wrong, I think. And so when we get to heaven, we'll see which one of us is right, but I need to prepare at that point.
Yeah. Because one of the things that Colleen said early on is the idea of who do we get to disagree with? Who do we get to call out? Because it's so easy for us to point out the false teachers, and it's so easy to point out the ones who may be out, not that they're not believers, but they're just outside of our camp. And so we poke at those who we just disagree with. But even in our camp, right? You mentioned John MacArthur, Andrew. Chris and I had a conversation a couple months ago. And so I'm kind of glad you're here, Chris, so that you can validate this. But, John MacArthur came out and he said something that I disagreed with. I really disagreed, because I think what he said could have been taken a number of different ways for people who aren't mature and able to think about some things. And so, it's almost like it's not okay to criticize John MacArthur on something, but it's okay to criticize, say, Al Mohler or one of these other guys. But one of the things I think we need to do is we need to say, okay, my favorite pastors or my favorite preachers, my favorite theologian, fill in the blank. Where do I disagree with them on? Because if I agree with them on everything, then they become the standard. Andrew, I think you were alluding to that they become the standard of everything. So that now I don't even go to scripture anymore. I just say, I look up a topic and say, what does such and such say about this topic?
Right.
And whatever they say is gospel.
Yeah. And I think that becomes a different danger that other than the
Turns
danger
into idolatry.
but yeah, because it is a form of idolatry. Yes. I think that what you end up having is a lot of times you're talking about the fanboys that if you disagree with them, they come after and start attacking you. It's a thing of as if they have to always be right. I understand when someone you care about, someone that you've learned a lot from, you don't want them being attacked. I understand the sense of wanting to defend, but we have to make a separation between defense of, okay, is that a legitimate point? I mean, I recently re-released the episodes I did about Al Mohler, right? I think that the way that I went about that, I thought was respectful. I'm using his own words and I'm just applying it. I've done, we've done a series of episodes on Apologetics Live dealing with a very well-known evangelist's church. And, so yeah, it had huge impact. We ended up having a very large ministry that I was speaking to just last week about it because they actually watched all, I don't even know, 10, 20 hours of episodes. And
it's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And, the thing that this one person said was, we could see how you guys really handled it well. You handled the issues of not just being attacking, but really trying to dig into what's going on. And it was interesting because when we did that, there were a lot of people that just wanted to defend and attack us. And in the end, it started to say, oh, you know what? I'm seeing some value here. And there does seem to be concern. So I do think when we see those dangers, that's a different danger than what I was thinking. And Colleen brought up something I want to get back to as well, because that's something I didn't think of as a danger, is the family or friends who the relationships, how it affects the relationships when someone does become a celebrity preacher. It is something where, that it like, for example, I go to Shepherd's Conference each year. And even though it costs me more money to stay at a hotel, I go the week early. And the reason I do it is I go do open air evangelism with Ray Comfort. Okay. We do go down Huntington Beach and I do it the week before because I know when I'm there, he's going to say, hey, Andrew, you want to get up on the box and do some evangelism. I am uncomfortable doing it the week after when all the other guys that were at Shepherd's Conference are there at the beach, because I've had it happen when Ray will say, hey, Andrew, can you get up next? And when Ray does that, I get down and there's a whole bunch of people that really don't care a whit about me, but they're pretending to, right? They care about Ray. It changes the way that the relationships occur. I think about, my daughter who, when she went to Cedarville University, and there's guys who'd be speaking at Cedarville who knew me, and it would be it was a thing where it changes the dynamic, and she would go through it, so it's hard when it's just different when there's like people who, I'm just thinking of Darcy that you mentioned, Colleen, like being R.C. Sproul's granddaughter, you're going to get to know a lot of very well-known people, and one of his grandsons are, I also know, I've met him through G3, and it's funny because he doesn't have his last name on his name tag because he doesn't want anyone to know he's a Sproul. And he and I had talked about it, and he's like, yeah, I mean, once anyone finds my last name, they really don't care about me.
He looks like RC though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was
I know
really
who you're talking about.
It was really funny because the way we found out was Justin Peters and I were doing something with the hotel room, changing rooms. He was helping take care of it. And he just happens to mention his grandmother, Vesta. And all of a sudden just goes, wait a minute. are you RC's grandson? And he's like, well, yeah, I am.
I wanted to bring up a point from a little bit earlier where you were talking so much about the people defending celebrities and putting them up on pedestals. And what I found interesting about that discussion was that you were all talking about the people who follow them, not the people being followed. And so I think that at least some of the danger in celebrity pastors or celebrity Christians is they can't always control their followers. And you can't necessarily hold every man of God who is publicly producing the gospel or putting forward the gospel and is standing for the authority of scripture. You can't always hold them accountable for what their supporters do in their name, because
I said that, so I do want to clarify, because I don't think that it's John MacArthur's fault that some people elevate him like that. I think when we talk about celebrity pastors, a lot of the things I said in the beginning, I'm talking not about them as much as how we elevate them.
Well, it wasn't just you, Colleen. It was just this whole discussion that was going on just momentarily, not that long ago, where we were all talking. There was this discussion going on about, that they would come up and be talked about and be defended when, and all that kind of thing, is that you can't always control what the followers do in your name.
Yes, but sometimes you can. Like I have issue with those that do that, like Joy or Micah would be an example.
Yeah.
When I would disagree with her on something she would do, she would word things like, if she responded, she would word things in such a way to get people to respond for her. Because I remember calling her out once on something, and her response was, "Does anyone here agree with Andrew?" And then everyone just piled on.
Yeah.
And so in that case like that,
well,
yes,
I'm not saying they're all innocent. I'm just saying that you can't always, like Al Mohler. I don't know what you said against Al Mohler. I'm currently Baptist, so I kind of like Al Mohler. I wouldn't put him up on a pedestal, but I think that at least half of the problem with celebrity pastors are the people who follow them, if not more than half the problem. Because the issue is,
I would say that's, yeah.
I can like Al Mohler, I can listen to his podcast occasionally and not put him up on a pedestal, because, as a Christian, I feel like I should hold every leader over me accountable to the scripture. But there are a lot of infant baby Christians in the Western church who are not capable of thinking for themselves, and part of that is a lack of teaching of apologetics in churches, and a lack of giving people the ability to study scripture for themselves without having to believe what teachers tell them. And
this goes back to their need to be involved in a local church, right? This
right,
goes back to
right.
It goes back to the need for them to be shepherded by someone who could look them in the eyes and walk them through that. And I think, to your point, Eve, that's absolutely right. I mean, you can't, you absolutely cannot, John MacArthur is not responsible for what, some random Twitter follower or Twitter handle that has 5 followers gets on there and says in defense of him. I will say though, however, speaking back to, and this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, speaking to guys like Al Mohler, speaking to guys like Matt Chandler, speaking to guys like anybody really that that's higher up in the Acts 29 or in the SBC, the problem is their title, they have popularity. Right, they do, but just merely by their title, director of Acts 29 Church Planning Network, Matt Chandler, president of I can't remember, Southwestern, Southeastern, whichever seminary Al Mohler's at. Southern. Thank you. So, but the problem is you've got, and this is kind of shifting gears away from the people piece, and I want to kind of come back to the family piece for just a second, and then I want to move on to this. Let me say the family piece first. It's super important. You think of the granddaughter, the grandson of R.C. Sproul. You think of the, I personally know, and this is not to brag on me, to Andrew's point, I want to make sure I'm not being prideful, but I personally know I've had conversations with Mark MacArthur, John's son. And, one of the things that you find when you talk to people like Dr. Sproul's granddaughter or Mark or, anybody in that, in that side of things. I mean, yeah, look, they're sinners just like us. But they also confirm that these men are the same on stage as they are off stage. They are the same behind the pulpit. To be honest, they're bulldogs in the pulpit because they should be, but they're soft, strong, firm leaders at home. But that also puts pressure on the kids to make sure that they are pursuing holiness, that they're living lives, because immediately if something goes wrong with one of their kids, I think of, something that R.C. Sproul Jr. went through a few years ago. I think of recent accusations against Mark MacArthur, and their lives are under microscopes as well, just merely by the titles of their parents. Now, let me shift gears for a second. We can come back to that. Let me speak to the people that are elevated to quote unquote celebrity status just by their title. Okay. Al Mohler, Matt Chandler. The problem, and I'm going to get a little fierce here. The problem is you've got people like that want to talk out of both sides of their mouth. Right? You've got somebody like Al Mohler, to Andrew's point in Andrew's episodes, that wants to have his cake and eat it too. You've got guys like Matt Chandler who want to talk about being reformed in their soteriology, but absolutely hold to an antithetical view of anthropology when it comes to ethnicity. And so they want to talk out of both sides of their mouth to appease the masses. They themselves are yes men.
Well, I think that's where there does become a danger. And I'm going to want to bring Keith in because he came in, but I think where there does become a danger, and this isn't so much with the men sometimes, but publishers.
Oh yeah.
Publishers want to soften things to get the broader audience. I know that firsthand. I have one book that went through a publisher, Sharing the Good News with Mormons. There's a phrase I say all the time, and they didn't like it. They had to soften it. I say that the reason I do open air evangelism is one, to get primarily to get the gospel out, right? To preach the gospel unadulterated, unwatered down. But the secondary reason is to get one professing atheist to tell another professing atheist to shut up. Right? It talks about my character. Right? I want to get someone that vehemently disagrees with the message, tell someone that he's on the same side with, just to shut up because how rude they're being. They didn't like that. They're like, no, you can't word it that way. I'm like, but this is how I say it. They're like, no, to get one unbeliever to ask another unbeliever to be quiet. That doesn't have the same emphasis.
Right.
Publishers, I think, also influence that because they're just focusing on the platform. If people don't realize, publishers nowadays, when you publish a book, they're no longer interested in the content of the book. Literally, the contract that we had, with Harvest House and all the others that it was pitched to, they wanted to know your social media followers, your email list, how big's your platform? That's what they care about. It's like, do you care about the content of the book? I think that's secondary. But let me bring Keith in. Keith, why don't you introduce yourself and your podcast and let you get up to speed with this. With any, we're talking just the preachers, not just pastors, but people that are celebrities, well-known preachers. Are they helpful for the body of Christ? Are they a danger to the body of Christ?
This is Keith Helpsley, co-host of Quest of Truth. My other co-host is Nathan Caldwell. On the topic, just the fact that, there's the way people are, there's going to be some people who rise to the top. So you're always going to have somebody who is something of a celebrity in what they do. So is it a good thing or bad thing? I would have to say, well, it's probably neither, or I'd have to fall on the side of being good. But you want to have good people, much as you're talking about people, good moral character, with good moral standing, being there so they can represent, correctly.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where we've all come down on. Let me, I want to shift gears a little bit and go to a different topic that we kind of hit on earlier. And I think this is really, I think the central thing we've all kind of been talking around, but Colleen really honed in on it. It's the importance of local church versus celebrity preachers. When I stepped away from being a pastor and I started traveling and speaking with Striving for Eternity, I was away anywhere from 48 to 49 weeks a year, traveling and speaking. And I got to meet a lot of other guys that were doing the same thing. And I started to notice within a year or two that a lot of these guys had in their personal life had some failures. And those failures were not really noticed because they're up on stage and they're just moving to a next church and a next church and a next church. And so I ended up recognizing the fact that there's a need for the local church. We actually made a change, and we basically require that any of our speakers at Striving for Eternity will be at their home church at least half the year. Now, it doesn't mean, it's either every other week, or if it's going to be, half the month, whatever it's going to be. There's times where I travel for 6 straight weeks, but then I'm at my home church for 6 straight weeks. So we have that policy. I think what it is, it's a protection against, like we were saying about the attaboys and, that people get. I'll tell you, being on both sides of it, I'll come to it from a pastoral perspective. As a pastor, you usually hear the complaints. You bring someone in as a guest speaker that people have an issue with, the pastor's the one that's going to hear it. But when I travel and speak, all I get are the pats on the back. I know that if anyone doesn't like what I said, they're going to complain to the pastor, not me. But you can fall into a pride with that when all you're getting is praise and you're not having any local accountability in a local church. There's an importance to doing that. I mean, one of the things I loved was in an older church I was at, we had a guy who is mentally challenged. But I loved talking. He said that outside of comic books and the Bible, my book, What Do We Believe and What Do They Believe, are the only 2 books he actually ever read. Right. So, but it's so funny because I'd bring guys into the church with me that just happen to be visiting. And he's like, I never just think of you as Andrew. I always forget you travel with these people and talk, right? That's what we need. We need people in our life that just think of us as, you're just a guy I go to church with. I was used by God to lead a guy to the Lord who is very well known in jiu-jitsu circles. And I didn't know how well known. And it's really funny because in Christian circles, he looks up to me and he's like, oh, Andrew's like the best. Because you haven't seen a lot. But he thinks I'm so famous. But then, like in jiu-jitsu, when I'm in a gym, if I mention his name, well, everybody knows who he is. He basically had, it was like, hey, he brought, mixed martial arts to Abu Dhabi and these different places. It's like crazy when I found out, and I'm sitting there going, wow, I just think of him as Brian. That's all he is to me, right? He's a guy I disciple. Right. He looks at me and just goes, he just thinks of me as Andrew. That's what we need. And that's what I think the local church provides. So what do you guys think of the importance of local church versus celebrity pastors in that aspect? The other aspect, which was already brought up by, I think, Colleen, and as a pastor, I would agree with her. It frustrates me to no end when I'm pastoring and I have someone that's listening to someone on the radio, 5-6 days a week, and they're listening to me for an hour. And who really has more influence in the congregation's life, the celebrity pastor or the local church? So those are 2 things for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely like to jump that off, and then everyone can piggyback or beat me up or whatever. But looking at, and just in notes as you were talking, really there are 3 areas that came to mind. 1, you have the pastor. 2, you have the preacher, which we could say is an itinerant preacher. And then you have the listener. So just some names came to mind is, 1, I would say Anthony Mathenia, right? A local church pastor in Radford, Virginia. He was invited to be one of the speakers at the Cruciform conference last year. He had to cancel because he had to deal with local church issues. That was his main priority, right? And so as those of us who love the local church, we go, hey, we totally understand. You take care of your flock because that's whom God has put you over. That's your first priority. But then you have, let's say, the itinerant preacher, right? Paul Washer. Paul Washer is under the authority of Anthony Mathenia. So not only does Anthony have to look after his local church, he's got to look after this other preacher that is well known throughout the world. And Paul Washer also has to make sure that he's dealing in his local church according to the shepherds that are over him. And then you have the listener.
Let me just throw something out there because people probably don't know. To get Paul Washer to speak somewhere, Paul doesn't make that decision. Mm-hmm. His elders do. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the accountability. Right. He gets speaking events come in, and it's his pastors who make the decision. They meet and discuss whether he's going to go to that event or not.
Right.
So continue.
Right. And then you have the listener, the person who is listening to the local church pastor, but also listening to these other celebrity preachers. So, and I think one of the things that has elevated preachers and pastors to the position of celebrity is conferences. Now, I think their conferences are great. I think they're helpful tools and resources. But one of the things I think conferences need to do, and I think this is the direction that G3 is going, Chris, you might be able to speak more into this, is more regional, but focused on the local church. So one of the things I think would absolutely be great is if you have maybe one well-known speaker, but then you have a whole slew of local church pastors. That way people in the community know who the local church pastors are. And then, so you can do things throughout the community and know the churches that are solid churches to be able to plug into or plug other people into and things like that.
Well, that's what we used to do with our fire conferences. We renamed Equip conferences. That's what we bring in one big name speaker, maybe two big name speakers, and then some local guys. Mm-hmm. But
I love that. Andrew, to your question, I think I think to a brother that Drew and I have had the blessing and privilege of getting to know, a gentleman by the name of Reagan Rose, who is here locally. This guy was introduced to us through Pastor Brett Baggett, and who was a speaker at the Cruciform Conference, and Reagan has taken so much time with Drew and I, as Drew and I have been talking through and talking about planting a church. And so, Reagan is a guy who, he's a local guy that that is heavily involved in the local church, but at the same time, he's all about finding men and pouring into them. He spent over 2 hours with us on a Zoom call, and there's not a week that goes by that we don't have multiple texts and encouragement from him, resource sharing, so on and so forth. But there's a name that a lot of people have never heard.
Right.
To your point about, and I missed that point of the conversation, but the person that listens to, the radio 6 days a week and listens to, your local church pastor on Sunday, that can be a great thing for the encouragement and the edification and sanctification for that believer, and can either be a great thing or a horrible thing for that local pastor. It can be a great thing because that, through the work of the word, the Holy Spirit matures and sanctifies this person, and they come to the local church pastor and say, what can I do to serve? How can I help? Plug me in, use me for the edification of the bride of Christ. Or they can constantly compare and contrast and create division and infighting. And so it's one of those things that it's important to, from a believer standpoint, to listen to other preachers. But at the same time, you must understand that your local church pastor should be, hopefully, Lord willing, is spending anywhere between 20 and 35 hours a week pouring over the word of God so that he could bring a message that God has ordained for you, because he knows you as a part of his flock. So that can be, it can go either way.
Yeah. And just to also touch on something that Colleen said earlier is the importance of the local church and the local church pastor. She mentioned that when she had to go to the hospital, she called the first person she called was her pastor, and he beat her there. Wow. I've heard pastors say from the stage, yep, at 2:00 in the morning, and Chris has heard this too, At 2:00
yeah.
in the morning, if you've got an emergency, call your small group leader. Don't call me. And I'm going, then you're not a pastor. You're a community organizer.
Boom.
So, let me ask, Eve, you tend to be quiet a lot on some of these, but I want to just give you an opportunity. Local church versus celebrity preacher. What are your thoughts?
I think every Christian should be an active member in a local body. That's where we're commanded to fellowship with other believers. And
Amen.
The issue of whether or not they're getting teaching elsewhere. I mean, I sometimes find myself listening to sermons online, from pastors that I appreciate, their biblical leading, and some of our podcasts are probably sermons, that we expect people to tune into and listen to. I think it's wonderful if people are spending their free time listening to godly content that is outside of the church, because that means they're not watching Marvel movies and TV programs and feeding their minds with things that are not of God. I mean, if people are spending hours a week listening to Christian content, praise the Lord. But at the same time, the local church has a responsibility to be teaching the believers within their body how to discern what is truth and what is false. And if they're not doing that, and their fellowship, the flock, are going outside of the church and feeding themselves with all kinds of things out there, we know there are wolves among the sheep, and the celebrity, the great names that are out there, the big names that are out there, draw the sheep into their flock. And if the local body is not helping to guard the sheep, they're going to be led astray. And so you can't put it necessarily on the blame on either side, because the sheep are going astray, maybe because they're not getting fed by the shepherd. And I don't know what the solution to that is. We can't force every Christian in the world, in the country, to go to a church, to pick a church and go to it and fund it and spend their time in it. They have to want to be there. They have to be spirit led to join and be committed to it. And the celebrity pastors, some of them out there, might actually have things to help feed the local bodies to do their job better, to be better apologists, to be better at feeding the flock so the flock doesn't go astray. And I think there are quite a few ministries out there that's the whole point of the ministry, is to feed the church, to make the church better at feeding the sheep. And so, and some of those people become celebrities, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with them being celebrities if their focus is still to aid the local church in feeding the flock. Did any of that make sense?
Allow the
No,
that was right on. That was right on. I mean, let the Lord, elevate who he's going to elevate, when he does, and how he does it. And Eve, to your point, yes, and Drew mentioned it earlier. That's exactly why ministries and like G3, and Josh, he wanted to move to an every other year, a biannual conference. The G3 conference, brings anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people to Atlanta, and it was just exploding. And so he didn't want it to be just about the conference, but what was G3 doing to equip local churches? And so, to Drew's point, they've partnered with some phenomenal ministries. And they're going to start churning out free content available. Solid content available to pastors and churches just for that, right? Just as Ephesians says, for the equipping of the saints and the building up of the body of Christ. And so that's why they moved to a biannual conference schedule. And then on the off year that the big conference isn't happening in Atlanta, they're going to do multiple regional conferences. And they're going to places that, that you wouldn't necessarily expect. They're wanting to do right now, they're looking at some venues, possibly somewhere in the the upper Midwest. They're looking down south Florida, and some other places throughout the country that people can't get to. They can't spend thousands of dollars to go to G3. They can't spend, pastors don't have it in their budget to spend $3 to $5 grand to go to the Shepherds Conference in LA. And so ministries like G3, ministries like Founders, what Striving for Eternity does, it's that is awesome. And I think that, going back to Scripture, right? Taking it back to Scripture, we remember the Apostle Paul's words for those who think that they have arrived. I think of Philippians, chapter 3. And when Paul says this, he says, and I'm reading out of the LSB, the Legacy Standard Bible, says, "Not that I've already obtained it or have already become perfect, but I press on to that I may lay hold of that for which I was also laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brothers, I do not consider myself as having laid hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead." And to everybody's point, what lies ahead is obeying the commands of Scripture, to get involved in your local church, and should the Lord, raise up a pastor and put him in the limelight. Again, other people have said this too. May they be men of strong moral character, and men who are seeking to serve their local church above and beyond.
I want to just add one thing to that too, Andrew, that your original question here. If I were to emphasize one point in this whole entire conversation, it is the importance of the local church. In the local church, when you're a member of a local church, there is an authority that your pastor and elders have, a spiritual authority. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them on everything, but you do need to honor that authority. I mean, they are the ones that, well, in the Reformed Church, they are the ones that decide, that admit you to the communion table, that administer the sacraments, baptism, and Lord's Supper. And I will tell you, if I had like 2 churches near me, and one of them had a dynamic pastor that I maybe would almost never speak to, and the other one, maybe he was preaching the word solidly, maybe not as dynamic as the other one, but that one was the one that comes to your house in the middle of the night when you're having a severe marriage problem or a problem with one of your children, or the one that's going to disciple you, that's really going to shepherd. Because I think ultimately that's one of the things that we have lost. I see it all the time in my own Facebook group. We've got almost 7,000 women, and I'm very, very strict in there. And there are a lot of posts that come through, and a woman says, should I do such and such, such and such? And we go to her and we say, this is a question for your pastor, not a Facebook group. But that's the thing that even more than these celebrity pastors, is to really value the importance of the local church and your local pastor, who should be shepherding you, not only in preaching those sermons every week, but also in biblical counsel, and just doing life, that community that happens. Okay, and I know that going to Reformed NAPARC churches, for me, for the last 26 years, that they are small churches. I understand that. And even a lot of NAPARC churches, it gets to a certain size, time to plant another one. But being in those sorts of churches for 26 years, I've seen the value in that, and just having that community, and knowing my pastor, I mean, in Reformed churches, pastor and elders come to your house even twice a year just to sit down. How are you doing? What are you struggling with? How's your marriage going? How's parenting going? Can we help you with anything? You're seeing them every week, and you can go to them, but having them come and sit in your house and really just talk to you and find out, how are you doing? Because sometimes we don't tell people, well, actually, I'm struggling. My son is rebelling and I don't know what to do, or, so that's one thing, even with Theology Gals, even with my group, that we emphasize over and over, is the importance of the local church and the shepherding and the discipleship that happens there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
one.
We've had people email the Matter of Theology email and just asking question after question after question. And the there's some theological and doctrine questions that are sure, we'll answer, but there comes a point where when it starts getting into relationships between husband and wife, kids, things like this.
Yeah.
I've had to reply back and say, you need to be involved in a local church, because this is a job for a pastor, and I'm not your pastor. I can answer your questions on doctrine and theology, because that's what we cover, but this stuff, this is pastoral issue, and I'm not your pastor. And come to find out, this person was one of our Patreon supporters. They stopped becoming a Patreon supporter, and they eventually told me why, but then they reached back out and they said, hey, I'm involved in a local church and my wife is now a believer.
Awesome. Yep.
And and just all these things. And I'm going, hey, praise the Lord, man.
Amen.
But another person I wanted to throw out there that is sort of in the celebrity realm, but is a local church pastor and elevates the position of local church pastor over everything else. That's a person named John Snyder, who is someone that I have come to respect a lot of the work that he does. And I had a phone call with John Snyder about a month ago, and we talked for about 45 minutes and stuff like that. And he was telling me about when they planted Christ Church New Albany. He was living in South Mississippi, and I think New Albany is in North Mississippi. And one of the things he said has to be a staple is Sunday evening prayer gatherings. He said, I will not be a part of it if we can't have Sunday evening prayer gatherings. And so they were just getting started. And it was one of those, he would drive up, to preach. And so, but because he lived 5 hours away at the time, and the person he was planning with would say, you don't have to come, tonight, this is what we're doing, but we got it covered. And he goes, no, if I'm going to be a part of this and a part of this local church, I need to be there, because the people are going to get their cues from me as a local church pastor. They're going to pick up on what I think is important. And if I think that the local prayer gathering is important, they're going to think it's important, and they're going to come. If I think my local church is important, then they're going to think the local church is important, and they're going to be there.
Yeah. And I
mean,
that
brings up another point. It's just, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I have a policy similar to Drew. When I get people that contact us at Striving Fraternity asking for counsel, I usually will say, have you spoken to your local pastor first? I won't even get engaged with counseling them. And unless they have to prove to me they cannot speak to their local pastor, which I don't see any reason they can't. And so, I'll give general advice, but I'm always saying, you got to talk to your local pastor. He's the one that is the authority in your life. Mm. And if you're not going to him, then typically people that are doing that is because they're trying to avoid. They're going to go to people that they want to hear what they want to hear. They're going to go to the right. Oh, okay, you didn't give me what I want to hear. I'm going to go to someone else. And once I get what I want to hear, I could feel justified.
Yeah. Well, it's also easy if you're not going to your local church pastor, because your local church pastor should know the things that are going on in your life. If you're going to someone outside of that, it's easy to manipulate the situation and not give all the information. So it's easy to gain the answer that you want when you're talking to someone that doesn't know the whole story.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that speaks to, Hebrews 13, right? It's you obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account, so that they will do this with joy and not groaning, for this would be unprofitable for you. You submit to your local church. And Drew, I love it that you just brought that point up. It would be easy, to find a quote unquote celebrity pastor or something like that, or somebody associated with them, and tell them, your church hurt story, but not include your part of that. Were you involved in that?
Right.
What did you do? How, what did, and it may not even be something that you did, but what did you do to try to rectify, to reconcile? There's so many things that could go wrong with that, but to Colleen's point, and I love that. her point about true Reformed churches. Your pastor's going to come to your house, sit down with you, sit down with your wife, sit down with your family, ask how things are going, what do you need, and because those leaders ultimately will give an account for your soul. It's as to Andrew, to your point too earlier, Dr. MacArthur's been one that's I mean, anybody who knows me knows I love the guy, I appreciate him, and very influential in my life. But Dr. MacArthur is not going to give an account for my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's going to be my local church pastor that's going to do that.
And those celebrity ones who we mentioned earlier that are chasing the platform, they need to be careful because they're going to have to give an account.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
So let me, Keith, I don't know if you have anything more that you'd want to add. You've been kind of quiet, but give you an opportunity.
Well, yeah, the local church is the way to go. I mean, if I have a problem, I'm more apt to call my local pastor than say Andrew Rappaport.
So
I barely know you.
Exactly.
Yeah, when it does come to local churches, the pastor does have to answer for your soul. I have been in a church, at least one, where the doctrine wasn't being preached right, and there was very little pastoral care, and things just came to a head, and we actually changed churches because of issues with the local church and the pastor not doing what he's supposed to do. So sometimes local church has issues like that, but even so, there ought to be somebody local that you can go to first if you need support.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion we've had here tonight is, yes, there is some value with celebrity preachers. They are helpful for the body of Christ, but, and it's a big but, it comes with a lot of dangers. There's a lot of harm that ends up being done. And I think overall what we end up seeing is that the focus really is the local church versus some celebrity. The celebrity is not, yes, you can learn things from them, but they're not the ones that are going to give account. The reality is that there's some people who reach out to different ministries, whether it's Grace to You, Striving Fraternity, Matter of Theology, Theology Guys, whichever. There's a reason some people will reach out to a ministry rather than the local pastor. And some of it's because the local pastor actually knows the person. Right? If I get someone that is going to contact me, I get their side of a story when they're telling me about what happened in their church. I don't know the church, right? I don't know any details. I only know their side of an argument, and everyone's going to make it sound like their side of the argument is the true side until you talk to the other side and go, oh yeah, right. So there's a whole bunch of people that do reach out to ministries like that because they want to avoid the fact that their local pastor knows they're a problem, right? And so the thing that we've all kind of agreed to is the local church is the priority. We should be getting our pastors to teach into or pour into our life far more than the guys we would listen to on the radio or the podcast. I remember I had a book that I'll probably never put into print, but I was working on a book on evangelism, and in there, in the opening, like in the page where you have the acknowledgement type pages, I basically had a thing in there that said, and I should have actually included this in my other books, and maybe I will in the future, but I had a thing in there that said, if you haven't read your Bible today, you shouldn't be reading this book today. Right? If you haven't heard from your pastor, your pastor hasn't been teaching into your life this week, then you shouldn't be listening to our podcasts. And that may seem like a strange thing to say, right? Because we're all podcasters. But I would rather people listen to their local pastor than my podcast. That's the importance, because they're going to sit under that teaching and be learning from someone that's accountable for their soul. And
Andrew, can I jump in for 2 seconds? Our hearts are idol factors.
Mississippi. Oh,
One, right. So our hearts are idol factories. That was John Calvin. And taking that a step further, I had a brother, Reagan Rose, who put on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, what do you reach for first in the morning, your phone or your Bible? And so what I've done is on my nightstand now, I put my Bible in front of my phone. So I have to touch my Bible to turn the alarm off, and then I grab my Bible and want to read it. But that was a little bit of a hard shift. Now, the reason I share that is to piggyback on what you just said. Is this, we have a tendency in our own hearts to elevate and to worship who we would view as, or who society, even Christian society, would view as a celebrity pastor. So my question for all of us, us talking, anybody listening, is, do you seek to know Jesus the way you would seek to know XYZ? Is your desire to know Christ and him crucified as strong as your desire to listen to the latest John MacArthur sermon? Where are your priorities? What are your focuses? And so, and I say that to say this, going back to, and then I'll be quiet, Andrew, going back to the local church piece. Scripture is clear that when a biblical church gathers and the pastor stands behind the pulpit, Christ and truly exposits the scriptures, Christ is speaking in that moment. So my question is for all of us, are we going to submit to that, or what we hear on the radio? Now, again, that's not minimizing the importance and the use of ministries like Striving for Eternity, Grace to You, G3, et cetera, so on and so forth. But, who do you want to worship more? That celebrity pastor who can do no wrong, or Christ, who died in your place for your sins, and his imputed righteousness was given to you through the shed blood of him?
yeah.
And I will make the point of saying that any of these celebrity Christians, they are all people just like you and I, who have feet of clay, and they all struggle. They all have the sin that easily besets them. They all have issues. And if you get to know one of them, you will immediately see that they are just people. And so don't always look towards the face on the screen or the voice on the radio or whatever it is, because that isn't God speaking to you. That's just another man who's possibly bringing you the word of God, which is good if he is, but that's not where our focus should ever be. It should be on the word of God first, and on the local church second, and then on working on having the Spirit-led conviction or the ability to know when you're hearing truth, so that you're not led astray.
Yep. No, I mean, that's the important thing is that, look, I've traveled, I've spoken with people, I mean, names you would know, and there's some people that I retain a friendship with, and some who I don't. There's some guys, I mean, I can name names of people who you love to listen to them when they are preaching and they're teaching, and it's like, wow, they're amazing. And then their personal life, you're like, really? Are you even saved? There are some people like that. And then there's guys who, Justin Peters, that guy is the same on stage. And well, okay, maybe not exactly, because he'll never tell a joke on stage. He does tell jokes. He'll just never, he'll never make fun of me, which I'll do privately. I keep trying to get him, but that's,
hey, we tried to get him to, and he wouldn't.
But that's that integrity that you have, and I think it's a good point, Eve, that you brought up. But I hope for folks who are listening that you at least were encouraged with the value of our local church. You have one last thing to say?
Yeah, I want to give an encouragement to pastors, local church pastors as well. Now, I'm not a pastor, but I am currently looking to plant a local church. My encouragement would be to make sure that you're tending to your flock and not chasing after a platform, because you're going to have to give an account to your local, to the flock that you're over. Now, I have found, and this is through personal experience, this is why I believe I have been called to plant a local church here in my community, but I have found through personal experience that it is so much easier for me to get in contact with, in a phone call with some of these, quote unquote local or celebrity pastors than it is a local church pastor, because they're chasing after a platform. So I would just, if you are a local church pastor, that is the position God has gifted you. That's a mercy from the Lord. And I would strongly encourage you, focus on that. Don't focus on a platform, focus on your flock.
That's a great way to end this episode. So thank you for that, Drew. And so we just want to encourage you guys, it's your local pastor, your local church. That's where we are accountable. And so just to let you guys know, as we wrap up, this is part of the Christian podcast community. We have a lot of podcasts out there. Go to christianpodcastcommunity.org, and you'll be able to listen to the podcast mentioned here and many others. Also, just to let you know, we are sponsored by MyPillow. So if you wanted to get a pillow, they actually have way more than pillow, mattress toppers, sheets, towels, even slippers, you can go to mypillow.com, go to the Radio Listener Square and use the promo code SFE to get the discounts. When you go there, you see there's a lot of discounts you can only get with a promo code. And the way to save money is with our promo code, which is SFE, stands for Striving for Eternity. You can also call them on our own 1-800 number, 1-800-873-0176. That's 1-800-873-0176, and use promo code SFE when you speak to someone there. I love MyPillow pillows, so I'm not just saying it because they're a sponsor. I've bragged about them for years beforehand, but they're made here in America, very good quality. You can wash the pillows, you can wash, they're for a lifetime. So,
and the mattress toppers and sheets are really good too.
Yeah, I'm going to have,
dog bed.
We're going to have to be getting some of them. So you could be, if you go there, not only to get great products, but in supporting an American-made company, but you're also supporting Striving for Eternity. So we thank you for that. So until next month, where we'll probably be, I think we're going to talk about next month, we're talking about possibly discussing apologetic methods, evidential apologetics, classical apologetics, presuppositional apologetics. So that may be the topic for next time, and we hope to see you then.
This is a ministry of Striving for Eternity.